we're going to be talking about intimate partner violence in the LGBTQ community. And my name's Aiello, and I work for an organization called Connect NYC. We partner with communities and families to create safe and peaceful environments and are working to end gender-based or intimate partner violence. Here's an overview of what we will discuss today. First, we're going to just do a refresher on what LGBTQ plus means, and then reminder of what intimate partner violence is, and then looking at how intimate partner violence specifically shows up within the LGBTQ plus community. So going through the acronym, starting with the L stands for lesbian. A lesbian is a woman who is emotionally, romantically, or sexually attracted to other women or non-binary people. And this is the flag. I have all the flags for each one. Then the G stands for gay, a person who is emotionally, romantically, or sexually attracted to members of the same gender. Oftentimes, gay can be used to describe men who are attracted to other men, but it also encompasses women and non-binary people too who are attracted to people of the same gender. The B stands for bisexual. It's a person who's emotionally, romantically, or sexually attracted to more than one gender. It doesn't have to be at the same time or in the same way or to the same degree. It really exists on a spectrum. And another word for bisexual is also pansexual, which is someone who is attracted to other people regardless of their gender identity. The L, G, and B are all referring to sexuality. So that is who you are attracted to. But the T is referring to gender. So it's an umbrella term for people whose gender identity is different from the cultural expectations of the sex they were assigned at birth. So the sex they were assigned at birth does not match the gender identity with which they identify. Transgender is different than sexuality. Someone who is trans can have a sexuality that is straight, gay, lesbian, bisexual, etc. And this is the trans flag. And then Q stands for queer, which encompasses a spectrum of identities and orientations that are counter to mainstream heterosexual straight relationships. It is really a broad term to encompass non-straight sexualities and not cisgender identities. So cisgender means that the sex you were assigned at birth matches the gender with which you identify. So queer can refer to someone with a sexuality outside of the norm or a gender that doesn't match their sex. And this term has previously been used as a slur, but more recently it's been reclaimed by many parts of the LGBTQ community. So people now positively identify with the word queer. And then the plus recognizes that there are so many identities under the LGBTQ plus umbrella, and asexual and intersex. Sometimes we hear LGBTQIA. Just to go over that, asexual, or some people say ace, refers to a complete or partial lack of sexual attraction or interest in sexual activity. Again, it can be a spectrum, so people may experience absolutely no sexual attraction or a little bit. And then the I is intersex. Intersex people are born with a variety of differences in their sex traits and reproductive anatomy. So there's wide variety among intersex people, including differences in genitalia, chromosomes, internal sex organs, hormone production, or secondary sex traits. That could be like facial hair. So AI is just a few of the other terms that could be encompassed in referring to LGBTQ plus people. I think a lot of times gender and sexuality have been conflated in our society, and people think they are the same thing, but they're really different identities. Here's a refresher on intimate partner violence. Could also be called dating abuse, interpersonal violence. There are many different words, but what we're referring to is the actual or threatened abuse that impairs the ability of survivor to function in a self-determining and healthy way or causes them to be afraid. These terms here, physical, sexual, psychological, and economic abuse, are different tactics or styles of abuse that often are happening simultaneously. And we'll go through those different kinds of abuse. But basically, intimate partner violence is really about about an imbalance of power. It's a pattern of coercive behavior in which one person is trying to establish and maintain power and control over their partner. Because it's really focused on power and control, we often see a power and control wheel here. And this power and control wheel is specifically for gay, lesbian, bisexual, and trans relationships, because the outer layer of the circle is about systems of oppression that can fuel intimate partner violence. So homophobia, biphobia, transphobia can be behind this sort of violence in queer relationships. And then all these different slices of the circle show different ways that someone may use these tactics to maintain the power and control that we just talked about. But when we're talking about intimate partner violence and queer or intimate partner violence in general, we want to know that survivors all have unique experiences. So that's why we want to understand intersectionality, which is a term coined by Kimberly Crenshaw, which frames the importance of recognizing an individual's identity and the impact that different systems of oppression have on their experience. To understand this, we can think about how survivors who are in a straight or heterosexual relationship may be treated very differently by law enforcement or their social circles than a survivor who is identifying as LGBTQIA+. And sexuality and gender are just one aspect of a system of oppression, but this can be extended to different identities such as race, citizenship, disability. This is just one aspect, but we really want to be recognizing that survivors all have unique experiences, and we want to be aware of how their certain identities may impact those experiences. So thinking about intimate partner violence in the context of queer relationships, we can see here the pink is heterosexual or straight relationships. The other colors are bisexual or gay and lesbian. So the prevalence of intimate partner violence is higher for bisexual or gay and lesbian people than their heterosexual counterparts. And then over here, that's referring to sexuality. The 54% is referring to gender identity. So 54% of transgender people experience domestic violence in their lifetime. Now we're going to look at why is it that queer relationships experience higher rates of intimate partner violence. This is just looking at sexual assault. 1 in 5, this is the sexuality piece, lesbian, gay, or bisexual youth have been forced to have sex, and 1 in 4 transgender youth. So again, just recognizing that anybody can experience sexual assault or dating abuse regardless of their gender or sexual identity. In intimate partner violence situations, a variety of tactics are used to again establish and maintain that power and control. A lot of these tactics overlap, and someone might be experiencing multiple at the same time. Starting with verbal tactics, these are using words and also body language as a tactic of power and control. These are some examples of verbal abuse, and I've put ones that are specific to the queer and trans community in orange. Misgendering is when someone refers to you as a gender other than the gender you identify with. So in an intimate partner violence situation, someone could purposely be referring to their partner as a girl when in fact they don't identify as a girl and they prefer to use they them pronouns and are non-binary. That would be a tactic of verbal abuse to establish power and control over the partner and make them feel like they're not being recognized for who they are. Another example of that could be name calling, and in a trans relationship, it could look like dead naming. Dead naming is referring to someone with their previous name or maybe the name that they were given at birth. So purposely misgendering or calling someone by the name that they don't go by could be really harmful to just their perception of their self and how they are viewed in the relationship. It's a very clear signal of disrespect. The next kind of tactic we have is emotional and psychological tactics. This could be using intimidation, manipulation, or harassment. First, we have isolation. It's often a very big part of intimate partner violence relationships, just isolating their partner from friends, family, and the community. In these situations, it could be outing the person, which means telling someone their sexuality when they weren't comfortable with that. And that could lead to them being isolated from that community if they're not accepting of queer and trans identities. Another important term is gaslighting. The term comes from the 1944 movie called Gaslight. In that movie, it was a couple and the husband was purposely dimming the lights in the house every night, but told his wife it wasn't getting any darker. So she doubted her reality and thought she was going crazy. So gaslighting is when someone makes someone doubt their reality or feel like they can't trust themselves. So these are some examples of statements that can be gaslighting in a queer relationship and make someone doubt their reality. Gay people or men can't be abused is a stereotype, and saying that would gaslight the person into thinking, oh, I'm not experiencing abuse because of the identity that I hold, when in reality they actually are experiencing abuse. Another stereotype is that bisexual people are hypersexual and can't be sexually assaulted. And then a last one is that abuse doesn't happen in the LGBTQ plus community. So some people subscribe to the stereotype that if you're in a same gender relation, can't abuse each other, when in fact it is possible for one person to maintain power and control over another, even if they are the same gender. Another example of this emotional abuse is shaming and humiliating. In a queer relationship, that could look like using homophobic or transphobic slurs to refer to the partner. So that's pulling from these oppressive systems that are already being oppressive and establishing power and control over someone, and now their partner is using that to establish more power and control over them. Using any kind of threats is an example of emotional abuse, including threats to out the survivor or tell people about their sexual or gender identity if they're not comfortable with that. I also want to highlight here being jealous and overprotect. This can be really hard in queer relationships when people might have friends of the same gender and they also are interested romantically in the same gender. Their partner could feel that they shouldn't have any friends because they're attracted to the same gender. We also want to recognize an aspect of emotional abuse could be using children as weapons, calling in false reports of child abuse or threatening to take custody, and this can be even more complicated in queer relationships. Another tactic could be preventing the survivor from accessing the LGBTQ plus community or resources. That can be a really important part of someone's identity to have that queer community and feel validated in who they are, and to ice them out of that would further that process of isolation. Then one last one to highlight here is destroying a survivor's possessions, specifically gender affirming possessions. An example of this could be for non-binary or trans men that may wear binders. That's an important part of their wardrobe to feel affirmed in their gender expression. Destroying those possessions or access to materials that people wear to feel authentic in their gender would be a form of emotional abuse. Then we have sexual tactics, which could include sexual coercion, which is forcing someone to engage in sexual activity they don't want to, sexual aggression, violence, and also reproductive coercion, so controlling aspects of reproductive health. Here are some examples of sexual abuse. We have rape and sexual assault, also sexual coercion or guilt trip, making someone feel that they owe their partner sex or pressuring them to have sex. Anything outside of an enthusiastic yes is not consensual. In terms of queer relationships, this could be convincing a partner not to use contraception because LGBTQ plus is safer. Again, this is drawing from cultural stereotypes saying women don't rape or men can't be raped, when in reality, anybody, regardless of their gender, can experience sexual violence. Another example of sexual abuse could be using gender roles to control how a partner has sex. Any sort of pressure to engage in sexual activity that isn't validating to that person's gender identity would be really harmful. And another example of that could be using words for a partner's body type that doesn't align with their gender identity. So everyone has different words that they're okay with being referred to, and it's important to check in with partners so we can make sure that we're respecting their gender identity and how they want to be referred to. Purposely referring to their body parts in ways that doesn't align with their identity would be really harmful. Next, we have financial and economic tactics. This could be using financial sabotage, control, or coercion. What does that actually mean? Stealing from the survivor. That could be monetary, but it could also be possessions. Identity theft, and this could be more common in relationships where people are the same gender because it could be easier to theft their identity. Pressuring the victim or survivor for money or economic support. Any type of pressuring in a relationship is to maintain that power and control. So we want to avoid pressure of any kind. But in this case, economic pressure, and an example of that could be pressuring a partner to pay for all of their gender affirming care and make them feel like it's their responsibility when it's the responsibility of the person receiving that care. Of course, their partner can contribute, but it should be their free will. We never want to pressure anyone to do anything they're uncomfortable with. Then we have education and employment prevention and sabotage, stopping one from being able to earn an income or complete their education. And one way this could be done could be outing the survivor at work. Telling people at their work about their sexual or gender identity could lead to them no longer being able to hold that position, especially in the current context that we're living in. Then all of these are preventing the survivor from accessing certain resources. So access to bank accounts, credit cards, preventing the survivor from being on a lease or mortgage. A partner could blame this on homophobia and say, oh, we can't be on the lease together because they won't allow us to live together. That could very well be a risk, but in some cases, it's not a risk, and the person is using that as an excuse to maintain power and control over their partner so that they are in charge of the lease or mortgage and the other partner has no say. Preventing a survivor from getting a driver's license that affirms their name and gender. Someone might want to change the gender or name on their identifying documents to one that more aligns with their authentic self, and preventing them to do that would just be maintaining that power and control over them. Then lastly, we have physical tactics. We keep this last because this is what people often think of when you think of intimate partner violence or dating abuse, but only 20% of dating abuse uses physical tactics. So it is present, but it is less common than we think. But examples of physical tactics are physical aggression and harm, also controlling physical appearance. So controlling the survivor's weight or their diet, and then controlling their physical appearance. Specifically, in this case, could be their gender expression. There are so many different stereotypes in the world, but also within the queer community about how you should appear, how you should show up. Even within queer relationships, there can be this pressure to conform to a masculine and feminine role, and someone may feel threatened by someone appearing too masculine or too feminine. So trying to control how they present their gender could be really harmful in that it's taking away from their ability to act in a self-determining way and present how they want to present in the world. Forcing plastic surgery, it wouldn't be gender affirming in that case. Not letting a partner heal from those surgeries. There are many gender affirming surgeries that take place that require a lengthy healing process. So not letting a partner heal or impeding on their healing journey could be an example of physical abuse. Then preventing access beyond or outside of the home. This is really another form of isolation. Sabotaging access to gender affirming health care. So whether it be getting your hormones, setting up appointments for surgeries, sabotaging that or canceling them, not allowing someone to access those resources. And then putting the survivor in danger. An example could be driving erratically, exposure to STDs. But an example in a queer relationship could be purposely doing a public display of affection in a dangerous anti-LGBTQ area. So forcing the survivor to engage in public affection when that could lead to a confrontation or even violence from other people in the community could be really unsafe. And then all forms of physically assaulting or harming the survivor, putting your hands on someone else in a way that they are not comfortable with, would be physical abuse. Then we want to talk about the obstacles to leaving. A lot of people, when they talk about intimate partner violence, say, well, why don't you just leave? So that's why it's really important to recognize the obstacles to leaving, and it's not as simple as just leaving. First, a big obstacle is fear. In intimate partner violence situations, the risk of homicide increases dramatically when a survivor tries to leave. So it can be a really dangerous time. So fear. Children, being separated from children, getting children taken away are all obstacles that could lead someone to stay. Economic factors. If one of the partners is relying on the other for basic needs or insurance, for example, it could be really hard to leave that relationship. Housing is another big one, especially because not all domestic violence shelters would accept someone from a queer relationship. Or, for example, some domestic violence shelters are only open to women. So that could pose a problem. And then, of course, there's also complications with shelters and bringing children or bringing pets. So that can be a factor as well. Family pressure can also be a big obstacle in that in some situations, this person may have worked really hard to get their family to accept their LGBTQIA identity and their partner. To then have to leave that relationship could feel really hard in the family context. There's also just stereotypes about being in queer relationships and feeling like you have to stay. Then really important to highlight is the legal system, because what oftentimes happens when police are contacted in intimate partner violence situations in queer relationships is that both partners will be arrested. So distrust in the legal system could be a very real factor preventing someone from coming forward. Then we have community. Queer community is really important to people, and oftentimes the couple could be in the community together and one person might be ostracized from that community and feel really alone if they are leaving their relationship and also having to leave their community. And then lastly, health factors. If this person is recovering from a surgery and is reliant on their partner for care, for insurance, as I said before. These are just examples of obstacles, but there are so many others, and we just want to recognize that it is very difficult to leave a relationship, and some of these factors make it even more difficult for queer people. Just thinking about how we can effectively support survivors if we are lucky enough that someone trusts us to share. We want to start with believing. A huge reason that survivors don't share with other people is fear of not being believed. It can be really powerful to know that someone is listening and believing what they're saying. So again, listen. Give the survivor a safe space to share their experiences. Practice empathy, compassion, and non-judgment. Especially in the context of queer relationships, people may have more judgments or find it harder to be empathetic with an experience they don't have. So it's even more important to try to tune into those factors in us. Ask the survivor how you can support them. The survivor is already getting their power and agency taken away in their relationship, and we don't want to further take away their agency by telling them what to do or forcing them to do something they don't want to do. That's why you want to ask the survivor how you can be helpful and allow them to take the lead and feel that agency again. Recognizing that trust is an earned experience and not a given. I like to say move at the speed of trust. It takes time to build that trust. People aren't going to share super openly right off the bat. It takes time to build that trust. No advice giving. Be an anchor and not a rescuer. We don't want to go into a situation like this with a savior complex or trying to be a savior for someone. We're really trying to be an anchor in reality and in the value that no one deserves to be in a relationship like this and have their power taken away. And then, of course, become familiar with resources available available to survivors, but knowing where you can direct someone can be a really helpful tool in supporting them. I wanted to end with this just to highlight queer joy. As hard as it is to live in a world that can feel like it's impeding on queer joy, there's so much value in queer community. So I wanted to highlight that. And here are some resources and places where I pulled information from. Specific to New York is the NYC Anti-Violence Project, which is specifically for queer intimate partner violence situations. This is my information and the information for Connect. If you have any questions or want to email me about resources, the language moves very quickly, but I think just asking that question and being open to learning is really what matters. We can't be perfect all of the time, so it's more the intention behind that and wanting to try. And I think also it's so individualized, like a word that works for someone could be offensive to someone else. So I would just say to ask people what words, pronouns, whatever it may be, resonate most with them. And asking that question shows that you care and want to try.
It's like wanting to pronounce someone's name correctly. People like it when you want to make sure that they feel comfortable and that you're identifying them in the way that they identify.